Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I have Marco with me. Marco is the leader of new systems development in Decred project. And today we are going to talk to him more about his project and try to understand the technical details of Decred and some exciting updates that they have for us. And I am joined with Vishal as the co-host for this podcast. So Marco, can you give a brief background of how you got into crypto and how you got involved into Decred?
Sure. Hey, hello everybody. I'm Marco Peereboom. Thanks for having me on. By the way, guys, appreciate it. So I got involved in crypto really early on. So the day the white paper came out is the day I got a hold of it. It went around in my circles, so I installed promptly, the original Bitcoin daemon and played with it, and then promptly lost my laptop. So one of the many stories that people have heard. So, but I was working with Jake at the time. That's the lead of the Decred project, and we were working on a different product called CipherTite. So it was a heavy cryptography-based backup product. So we really didn't pay too much attention to the cryptocurrencies at the time. We finished that crypto backup product. It was not successful, so we crashed it, and then we pivoted into cryptocurrency products, and that's when we started working on like BTCD and some other products like Coinvoice or Co-Invoice. So, and I want to say we started probably hacking on those 2011 is 2011, 2012 is when we started hacking in earnest on cryptocurrencies.
Okay. So, like, what's the story behind BTCD? And like, Conformal was the company, I think, that was pushing BTCD, and now you have company Zero that is working on Decred. So, can you explain your involvement there, and how does that structure look like?
Right.
Sure.
And
So,
I would like to add, like, I would really want to understand, like, what made you guys do like a different implementation of the Bitcoin node than the original one that was written in C++.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a fair question. So first off, we are all pretty heavy duty, engineering house, right? So we like to write things. We like to write things correctly. So the original Bitcoin code was pretty impenetrable. It was poorly written. Was in C++. Let's just say that the folks that worked at Conformal did not love that. And we also suffered a little bit from NIH, right? So not invented here. And honestly, there is no better way to learn a new system than having to actually write it, right? So by actually writing BTCD, we use that as a platform really for us to understand Bitcoin in very fine detail. There's only so much you can do by reading documentation, right? And even reading the code, you really truly have to experience it. So there were several reasons like that. We also did not love the security profile that the code had at that time, so we wanted to have a tighter security profile, if you will. So that answers your question. So now let me go back to the Conformal question. So Conformal started working on CipherTite. So that is the company that Jake and I co-founded. I'm the CTO. He was the CEO of that company. And as we pivoted to cryptocurrencies, and we did BTCD and Coinvoice and several other things that we were working on that were all cryptocurrency related. So we did that for a while as Conformal, and then we reincorporated as Company Zero for tax reasons, and to make a clean break from CipherTite and some other products that were unsuccessful. So that was really the entire background back there. So, and I'm also the CTO of Company Zero, and Company Zero is obviously the entity that got Decred going and started. So, and currently Company Zero is a contractor to DHG, so the Decred Holding Group. And the Decred Holding Group is the one that manages the treasury for Decred.
Mm-hmm. And like, what were the initial days like? Like, why did you start? Like, why did the core group of people of Decred start with Decred? Like, what did you see? Like, what was the initial idea, or what was the initial motivation?
So, writing BTCD was very exciting and fun right up until we released it. So we got a, let's say, less than warm welcome when we released that code. which was odd in my mind. It's still odd. We did our very best to make sure that we were bug for bug compatible. And back then the argument was, what if you cause a hard fork, which is kind of ironic at this point, right? Because there's 75 Bitcoins out there at this point that are direct forks of the chain. So in the way we view the world is that, as an example, the internet is not great because we have one web browser, right? The internet is great because we have multiple web browsers. The internet is not great because we have one TCP implementation. It's because we have multiple TCP IP implementations. So it's always safer for a network to have multiple implementations. At least that was our view. So, but since it was not received as well as we had hoped, we started doing some different things with that code base, though. So we actually used it as the basis for all the Bitcoin activity that we did. And but we being told to by some other folks in the community that they didn't want the code and all that, it just got a little old. And we wanted to do certain things, and clearly we had disturbed the power structure, and the power structure was unhappy with where we were heading. So after CoinVoice, we decided to pivot and go build that thing that we had been talking about for a while. And that thing ultimately proved to be Decred.
And what was the power structure? Is it that the trouble we see with Blockstream, we have one single company that has because there is no incentive for developers to work full time on an open source project. They can work part time as a hobby, but you need people who are full time involved. Yeah, what was the trouble that you faced?
Well, that is actually one of the reasons that we did not really love. So Bitcoin started out very decentralized, which is optimal. And then as time went by, it became increasingly centralized. And specifically with Blockstream swooping in and basically hiring all the Bitcoin developers, that's where that is not a good thing, right? So what is going to happen regardless in any situation like that is that the folks involved are going to get some sort of corporate agenda. It's just, that's just how it is, right? And by the way, don't get me wrong, I completely understand that you got to pay for bills, right? You got to pay for your kids' college, you got to have a car. So I understand that the need to hire people and to basically provide them with a salary so that they can work full time without having to worry about dental care. So it makes perfect sense to obviously pay these folks. So that's not, I have no beef there at all. But what I think was not foreseen was the centralization effect that a Blockstream has on the code base. So when we actually designed Decred from the very onset of it, we really wanted to make sure that would not happen. And that is why we have that treasury that reserves 10% of the block reward to continue to develop Decred, so that there is a way to get paid, so that you don't get a Blockstream that swoops in and then hires all the developers away and create a corporate agenda.
Would you like to ask anything here?
Right. So I would definitely want to understand what are you guys up to with Politeia? Obviously, I checked the new version that's out, and there was one proposal that was there, although the voting had closed. But what is the purpose of Politeia, and how do you see this being used for some of the real world use cases?
Okay, yeah, so that's a bit of a lengthier question. So first off, Decred has 2 layers of voting. That's something I always need to get across. And one of them is on-chain, and that one is purely for consensus and protocol reasons. So we do not have a fancy name for it. That is just basically our on-chain voting mechanism. And that results, by definition, on a controlled hard fork, right? So we basically implement new consensus rules, and therefore we are going to hard fork if the vote passes. And the idea behind there is that it's controlled, and therefore we know what's going to happen. There has been enough signaling from the network to know that the fork is going to be successful. Code has been written. It basically lays dormant. And so if the vote passes, then, like I said, it will actually activate the new code. So one caveat, so Decred is fork resistant, so it'd be very hard to actually continue on the minority fork. So, and what we have seen so far is that the minority fork always dies off pretty much immediately. So, but that gives us the ability to change hard things over time. And it may sound simple, but it's actually, I think, crucial to the longevity of any cryptocurrency. So if we can use a hypothetical, what if we use Blake 256, by the way, as our digest algorithm. So what if Blake 256 is compromised tomorrow? Now what, right? So in Decred's case, we would go figure out a different digest algorithm that we'd like, and we'd be able to switch pretty easily, because we would write the code, put up a vote, and then people would be able to flip to the new digest algorithm. So obviously there would be some interesting things going on there, right? Because I'm pretty sure the miners would not love that, and but we're talking about hard decisions that need to be made, and with this mechanism, Decred has a process and a mechanism to deal with hard changes that may need to happen in the future. And and with that, we hope that we are going to be one of the few coins that's going to be around 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. So that is the tier 1 on-chain voting mechanism in a nutshell. So then we have tier 2, which is, it has a fancy name of Politeia. And so what Politeia does is it actually, sorry, did you guys ask something?
No, go ahead.
So, and what Politeia does is, it is essentially a website that collects ideas and proposals from the community. So the community gets to say, we would like to spend money or Decred on this particular proposal, and it really has multiple uses here. So one of them could be, we're going to go to a conference. In the conference, we need plane tickets, right? And we need Uber, and we need a hotel room. So that one could be put up for the stakeholders, saying, hey, are we okay spending this amount of Decred from the treasury to sponsor this event? So if the answer is yes, then the funds are disbursed, and then that person can go use those as he sees fit. So that is one use. So the other use is actually to propose new code changes. So for example, I want to add Lightning. I mean, I saw that you guys were interested in that. So let's say we want to add Lightning as an idea. Okay, so that's going to cost 1 year of development of these 5 people, and that's going to cost this amount of money. And these are the 10. excuse me. And these are the 10. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh man, I just totally lost my train of thought here.
Yeah,
you're talking about layer two voting.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for a word that I cannot come up with right now. No, so but the idea is that you basically write a proposal with all the requirements in it, and as you keep hitting these requirements, more Decred will be made available to you. So as you progress, you would get paid, if you will, to get the work done. Does that make sense? So one of them is, so the on-chain stuff is really hard, no backseas voting, and then the Politeia portion of it is more signaling. It's more of a wish list from the community that is off-chain but enforced on-chain.
Mm-hmm. So I have like 2 questions here. Vishal, I think you have as well. So first one is like on the miner side, like can you explain like how do you, so like say if Decred made some changes to the protocol, and like the miners who are mining Decred, they have the option to like, how does that work? That why doesn't Decred do hard fork? Why is Decred hard fork resistant? Can you explain that as well? And second is like, who controls the treasury as such? Is it like ticket-based voting, or like how is that fund grant the distribution? How does that work out?
Okay, So you asked me 3 questions. There's no way I'm going to remember all 3 of them in order. So let me start with the last one.
I'll ask them again.
So let me start with the bottom one. So yes, it is a ticketing system. So the way it works is each block, somebody can go and purchase tickets. And tickets basically give you the privilege to vote. So every block, up to 20 tickets can be purchased. And then every block requires 5 tickets to actually do some voting. So we have a permanent agenda, which was the prior block valid. So that's one of the sticks we have to keep miners in check, to make sure that they are not doing bad things like mining empty blocks, for example. So, where was I going? So then every block has 5 tickets, and then there are set voting intervals for more interesting agendas, like so when we, for example, added I forget what it was actually, we needed to add a digest in order to do atomic swaps with Ethereum. So we added a primitive to Bitcoin script, to our Bitcoin script version. So and that was a hard fork, of course, because now you have a new opcode that didn't exist prior to that. So that was one of those things that we basically had to get in there by using the on-chain voting stuff. So, and as we went through all the steps, code was written, was active, people started voting, it passed, and then after the voting interval expired, we counted it and it passed, and therefore it got activated. Still making sense? So, by the way, this answers a little bit of your mining question. So, this was really uninteresting from a mining perspective, right? We just enabled an additional opcode, but it is a consensus change. So for miners, literally nothing changed, but for the network, now all of a sudden we had an additional opcode available to do atomic swaps with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So not all consensus changes are bad for miners. So we do obviously. We are in contact with the larger mining pools, and we do tell them that something is coming up, right? We do the same with exchanges and say, hey guys, there's going to be a hard fork, so you have to update your software. So, and actually as part of the entire, of the 4 steps or so that are involved with doing a on-chain vote, there is actually a settling period. So where people get an additional 3 to 4 weeks to actually go change the software. So step 1 is, hey, is the network, will the network understand the new rules? And if you are below the threshold, and I want to say it's 85%. So if 85% of the nodes are not updated, then the vote cannot start. So once 85% of the nodes have been updated, then the vote starts. And these, by the way, again, are all on set intervals. So it can take a week or 2 for the vote to actually start from the point that enough nodes on the network have reached, the threshold. Does that make sense?
It does. And like what I understand is that Decred is like pretty flexible when it comes to like the future of the project in general. But what do you think about a project like Bitcoin? Do you think it'll be possible for Bitcoin core team to implement some of the core features of Decred onto their like layer 0 or layer 1, like the base layer of the protocol?
So I don't think it will be possible from a political perspective. Code-wise, it would not be that complex to add some of these things. So the thing to realize is that if you launch without governance, there is probably a 0% chance of being able to bold governance later on. The thing is that once a current cryptocurrency is established, the likelihood that the power structure is going to give up some power is pretty much near 0, right? People do tend to so once they are elected to high office, they seem to want to hold on to that for as long as they can. It's human nature, right? So does that answer the question though? Is that I don't think that Bitcoin will ever be able to add some of these features for political reasons.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, power corrupts, so totally makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think you didn't answer that grant one. Like, so how does that work out? Like, you have contractors, they go to like the Politeia or Politeia, whatever you call it, and they give proposals, and the people, they vote whether that this person is seems worthy of receiving this grant. How does that work out?
So the process is you go to Politeia and you write up a proposal. And as part of the proposal, you're supposed to put a disbursal schedule on there. So when payments are going to be made. And and then there's milestones associated with it. And as, excuse me, so and as the proposal is progressing, if the milestones are being hit, then the stakeholders have to basically keep saying, yes, we have seen enough progress out of this contractor. And the contractor can be a single human or, you know, a corporate multi-human thing as well. So, for example, Company Zero has multiple people on staff working on Decred. So, and then Company Zero bills DHG for the time spent on Decred. And that is how Decred actually works for everybody. So Company Zero is not special in here. And once Politeia actually goes live, Company Zero is also going to put proposals forth every month saying, hey, this is the cost to run Company Zero and have these developers full-time working on it. Does the community, so do the stakeholders agree paying for that? So, and I hope they do. I hope they like our monkey tricks.
And like I was checking the like the Politeia site, it is, I think, on testnet currently, and it is very basic right now. So like, how do you envision that is going to work out in the future, and how will, like, what sort of use cases that you see that are going to be enabled by Politeia?
Yeah.
And
so
just to add, like, let's say you want to do like a small kind of elections or like public voting, even if it's not a country or a municipality, it might be a small organization. So can you please explain how the Politeia platform can be used for a use case like that?
Okay, yeah, so a couple of things here. So first off, Politeia is very basic by design because we like to make software that actually works first, and then we'll add bells and whistles later. So currently, basically, you can only write the proposal, and the human is supposed to do the things like the disbursal schedule and all that kind of good stuff in there. So behind the scenes, there is a pretty complex piece of machinery that deals with censorship, cryptography, dual-sided accountability, attestations, all those big words in crypto world that we had to hit to make sure that people's proposals are not being censored, not being modified by third parties and all that kind of good stuff. So a lot of design went into that, believe it or not. So even though it looks basic, it does a lot of clever things behind the scenes. So as we are going to progress and make Politeia nicer to use, one of the things we're going to do, for example, is create a disbursement schedule editor in there, so that you can actually click and point versus typing it in by hand. So we're going to continue to make it prettier and prettier, and that's how we always work, though. So we are an evolution, not revolution type software development house. So make it work first, we can boil the ocean later type deal. So, but we are essentially going to continue to add more features and make it prettier and easier to use for the stakeholders. So the second part of your question, so how do I, as a third party, use Politeia? So Politeia can currently be used in its current form as a document management system, if you will. So you could put documents in there and have all the fancy words that I said earlier, right? Attestation, dual-sided accountability, and so all those cryptography primitives that are supported in the backend are immediately available for a user of it. So what does not make sense within Politeia, and actually if you look at the architecture, so Politeia is a pretty generic system that offers the document management portion of it with all the crypto primitives, and then there's the Decred portion, which is a plugin to it. And that plugin does all the Decred specific things, including voting. So voting is not a Politeia function. It is the Decred plugin to Politeia function. Does that make sense? So it is orthogonal really to the system. At some point in the future, and we are not sure where this is going and how this is going to happen, but we are going to see if we can make some of the voting mechanism available to a third party, right? So how do we do something like we can do now with Decred tickets to vote on proposals? Can we maybe have somebody issue their own tickets then so that their users can vote on their proposals or whatever that means, right? Am I making sense? So, but that would require quite a bit of hacking on the bottom part to obviously be able to do that, because tickets have very interesting properties, which is, so we can, for example, prevent double voting on things. We always we always knew what ticket voted on what proposal and at what time. So, but if you are, for example, a municipality, and you want to ask your citizens, hey, can you vote on this? There is no, you don't have citizen tickets, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that would have to be expanded upon in order to use the system in a different fashion than what it does, besides obviously document management.
Which will also bring up problems like identity management and stuff like that.
Sorry, I didn't hear you on that.
And that would bring up the problem of identity management and like how do you make sure that these are the citizens of this particular jurisdiction and they have the right to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a non-trivial problem. And actually, the way identity management in Politeia is pretty complex, believe it or not. So we use ED25519 identities to identify the users. And inherent to that, it actually makes it not as easy to use as we'd like. So we have to create an identity, which is 32 bytes of random data. With those 32 bytes, that's you, right? And that is everything, and everything is signed using that private key. So when you submit a proposal, it was signed with that private key, right? And then when an administrator publishes that proposal, then that publishing is signed with the admin's private key. So everybody who participates in this system has private keys, and managing those, as you know, is not easy. So currently, it's all done in the web browser to make it as simple as we can, but that does mean that you cannot just move over to a different web browser and start using the system as the same user. So you would have to import your keys into the other web browser. So, and again, these are the things that we are going to try to make easier as time progresses. But if you want to have true cryptographic strong identities, you're going to have to maintain your keys somehow, right? And you don't want a third party to ever have access to it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I had a doubt, like when I was watching one of your interviews in which you talked about like Politeia can be used by, say, universities to put their degrees. I think it was you or Jake, I don't remember. And like university documents into the by hashing it and like into the Decred blockchain. So like how does the transaction fees look like? Like the people who can use that system, do they need to pay the transaction fees as well?
So we actually have another application sitting on top of our blockchain called DCR-Time. And what DCR-Time does is it anchors digests to the blockchain.
Okay.
So what it actually does is it collects digests for an hour. And so whomever submits digests, then they all get Merkled together. So you have a single Merkle root, and that Merkle root actually is what is stored on the blockchain. So, and with that, you can do proof of existence of any digest that you created, right? So you have a PDF, you run it through SHA-256, you get the output. That will be sent to DCR-Time. DCR-Time gives you the Merkle root plus the Merkle path, and then with that you can prove without any shadow of a doubt that document existed at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer the fee question is we run the DCR-Time, and if you use our DCR-Time, we have funded it, so and it pays the network fees that are associated with that. So, but it's pretty minimal though, because it is 36 bytes, I'm going to say, of data. So it's in the order of cents to get that anchored.
Got it. So it's like when say if there are a lot of people who are pushing their files, how does that happen? Like it won't matter because only the Merkle root is getting saved. So the hash, the output of the hash will be the same. Like it will consume the same data, isn't it?
Yeah, so basically the way it works is, and like I said, you collect hashes for an hour. So let's say you have 10,000 hashes that were submitted, then only a single Merkle root can be calculated out of that. Yeah. So everybody who submitted those, to those 10,000 digests is actually going to use that same Merkle root. That is their Merkle root to find it. So it is their Merkle root plus the Merkle path that actually determines the validity of the digest.
Got it.
Pretty quick, pretty cute and clever way of actually storing storing something on the blockchain without spending a whole bunch of money. And also, you could not put 10,000 documents up on the blockchain. That's ridiculous, right? That's not what it's for. So we basically store an op return with the Merkle roots. That's really essentially the entire trick.
Got it. And can you explain this structure as well? I'm really curious. Like, I think you you have a offline Git or whatever you call it, this system in your community. Can you explain how does that work? Like you have centralized servers who store the information and finally it goes to the blockchain.
Sure. So in our case, so DCR data is at the very bottom of Politeia. So, and the way Politeia stores the incoming documents is actually, we use Git. That is our snapshotting, a file system snapshotting mechanism. And it's, and for all intents and purposes, actually, Git is a bit of a blockchain, right? Because each commit is put on top of one another, and you get a digest that goes with that. And as long as you don't change anything, the coherency is going to be, maintained. So what we do then with Politeia is so for example, a proposal comes in and it's literally committed into the Git repo. And then once, I also want to say every hour or so, we snapshot Git. And what I mean by that is we basically see up to where we have anchored it in the blockchain. And then all the missing commits are then sent to DCR-Time. And anchored in the blockchain as well. So we actually anchor individual commits within Git. So if there were 10 commits from the last time that you anchored, you're going to send 10 digests to DCR-Time, which then all 10 will be anchored. Does that make sense? So and with that, now we can now every third party can basically clone the Git repo and verify against those digests that the coherency of the Git repo has been maintained. Does that make sense?
Vishal, would you like to add anything?
Right. So behind the scene, it's just DCRD that's working, right? Which is just an implementation of the open timestamp, right?
It is a variation to the open timestamps, yes. So that was a very good piece of code that we borrowed some great ideas from. I want to say it's Peter Todd that wrote that.
Yeah, it was Peter Todd.
Yeah, that is one of the killer apps, honestly, for blockchains. And but we obviously could not use open timestamps because it's Bitcoin related, and we wanted to do everything in Decred. And of course, not invented here, so we had to write our own, which we did. No, but actually, the things like DCR-Time, which are somewhat trivial applications, are actually extremely powerful in what they offer from a from a human perspective, right? So proof of existence is something you can take to court and prove validity of, right? So you can build a whole regulatory framework around that one simple idea that something existed at some point in time, right?
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, because you can do things like attestation. You can do, all the regulatory buzzwords. I'm not going to rattle them off.
Right. And I'm also super excited about Lightning Network coming on Decred. So what do you have to say about that? And what's the roadmap for Lightning?
So Lightning has been a bit of a bear. We had hoped to be done with that early this year. There were some bumps in the road. So basically what we did is we actually took the Lightning code, we cloned it, and then we created a translation layer between Bitcoin and the Decred bits, because Lightning is very, very clever, and we did not want to reinvent and write any of that. It was also written in Go, and actually they cloned the daemons original from BTCD, so we already had some familiarity, at least with all the infrastructure portion of it. So, so like I said, in order to keep the changes as minimal as possible, we created that translation layer portion. So there is one remaining issue, as far as we know at this point, but that one has been very tricky, and that is how do we sign certain things and how do we verify those signatures? That is a problem that has not been cracked yet. Also, we had some other things happening in the back end, which has pulled folks that were working on it onto quote unquote more important functionality for Decred. So, so unfortunately, I do not have an update as to when it will be released, but we obviously really want it because it adds speed to the network, which everybody wants and needs.
Right. So the current block time is like 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that'll be reduced to like whatever, microseconds.
Yeah, milliseconds, microseconds, probably milli. I mean,
milliseconds.
Yeah, because I mean, even at the lights, even at gigabit speeds, right, we still take a couple of milliseconds to get to you guys here, for example.
Right.
Yep. And like as a project Decred, like what sort of applications do you see? Like say, like for Bitcoin, people are going to say use it. A normal person will use it for payments or as a store of value. For Decred, like, do you think about these things? Like what exactly will Decred be used by a normal person?
So there's two things really there. So first off is when we did Decrediton, our wallet, when we initially launched it, one of the community members wrote a very unfriendly Reddit post saying how bad it was. And once we were done feeling sorry for ourselves, we went through that post and we basically wrote GitHub issues and all the things he was complaining about. So it turned out to be a very valuable piece of documentation because he was, quote unquote, a regular user and documented what sucked. Well, that's great. So we went in and we fixed most of those, if not all of those things. And Decrediton has gone from being a crappy wallet to kind of becoming the gold standard in the industry. Some commercially developed wallets aside. But Decrediton is real pretty right now and very user-friendly, and everybody can use it with minimal training. So yes, we are trying really hard to make Decred more and more available and usable by folks that are not techies like us, right? So, and I was going to add something to that actually. So yeah, the other thing to realize here is that because Decred is going to be starting to be run by the stakeholders, there probably will be people that show up and say, hey, we really would like Decred to do X, Y, and Z to make the user experience a little bit easier and better. And funds will then be released, obviously, to go develop those things. So I fully expect that in the future, the stakeholders are going to direct funds to making it more and more available, again, to more users all over the world.
Got it. So like you feel that Decred is going to get better with time because of the governance that is inbuilt into the protocol and might actually become more user-friendly and become more, more approachable to normal people than, say, even Bitcoin because of the incentives that you have designed.
Right, and if you actually look at from a voting perspective, so if you are a stakeholder and you vote, you actually get rewarded for that, right? Because part of the block reward goes to the stakeholders when they vote. Mm-hmm. So it's very attractive to vote on things, and turns out if you actually incentivize people to vote by giving them actual monetary value, that they show up. They are going to be better educated. Now it's no longer just well, I kind of think this, and it really doesn't matter because it's not going to impact my life so much, so I'm just going to vote X, Y, Z instead of, something else. So what we have seen is that the stakeholders that are engaged in Decred are pretty well versed and pretty well educated on what it means, what the votes are and have been in the past. Yep. So I think that actually incentivizing votes was one of the cleverest things that Decred has done, because it really seems to up the ante on voter participation.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Makes sense. And do you see like a prediction market use case on Decred, since this has like the voting mechanism inbuilt?
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Prediction markets in general are going to be huge in the future, right? So we have projects like Augur, which are built on top of Ethereum, and then there's Team Gnosis that's trying to like build like a prediction market on top of Ethereum network. So
you're talking about gambling, basically?
In general, I mean, for information.
Sure, gambling.
Sure, gambling is one of the bigger use cases. I don't want to deny that.
So let me give you the generic answer there. If the stakeholders want that, then they obviously are going to suggest that and potentially even fund it. Currently, that is not a thing that is on a roadmap I'm aware of. But there is no reason why it couldn't, right? Because we could obviously add stuff to it, or a third party could add stuff to Decred, right? It's a non-exclusive community. So if you show up with a good idea and the stakeholders agree, then we can go ahead and do it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I'd like to get your thoughts on how you are seeing trying to get more developers on board and getting more developers to contribute code to Decred. Do you have specific vision there as well?
So the contractor model that we have right now works pretty well, because people are self-motivated by the time they show up, and then they get paid in Decred to actually do some of the work. So currently it's front-loaded, right? People actually have to show up and do things, but once Politeia goes live, it's going to be flipped around a little bit, right? Because now you have to come up with an idea in a funding model, and then funds will be released as you do things. So it's going to flip around a little bit. But what it has done so far is that it actually has created a pretty interesting little economy, right? Because everything Decred related is paid for in Decred, right? All the developers are paid in Decred. All the contractors are ultimately swag, and all the other things are all paid for in contract from the treasury, right? So, and the more people you attract, the more people are going to use it actually as currency. And that is obviously our goal, to get it in as many people's hands as possible, so they can actually transact and do useful things with it. So, from a developer perspective, we're always looking for new developers. So, and if you want to make some money on the side, this is the perfect way of doing it, right? So the two things you got to have is motivation, because you have to show up. That's typically the biggest step. So then step two is you need to actually do work with understanding that if it's subpar work, you may not get paid for it, right? So there is a pretty big incentive to do proper work. So and if you look at what's hot right now in the I know at least in the United States, the big thing is the gig economy, right? Is people that drive Ubers, that Uber Eats. So all those show up when you have time, and then you leave when you feel that you're done, right? So that gig economy has upended quite a bit of traditional markets in the US. And what we feel is going to happen with Decred is that Decred is going to the model is actually going to upend high skilled labor versus low skilled labor, right? Because driving a cab is a low skill task, right? Whereas, writing some code is pretty high, that you got to have some schooling, right? And you got to figure some things out. So, and we feel that the model that Decred is pushing forward right now and actually has implemented is going to become more and more the norm worldwide, so that people can work on things that they're interested in, but they don't have a boss, right? They literally pick, I would like to do this for this company. That sounds like fun for 6 months, right? And then you move on and you go do the next thing that pays you for high skilled work. Does that make sense? So, and I think that Decred is really on the forefront of a movement that is going to start happening here in the not too distant future.
Yep.
Right, makes complete sense, and especially India has this gigantic pool of developers, and there are like millions of new engineers that like keep graduating every year, and I'm sure like some of them will find their way into the Decred project.
We would love to have them. So show up, write some code that is good, and you can make some money. It's pretty simple. But as a guy who has worked in open source for a very, very long time, it is pretty hard, to stay motivated at times, right? And when you're by yourself, and the reality is, it isn't for everybody. Sometimes it is nice to go to an office and hang out with your colleagues and talk and go to lunch and do those things. So not for everybody, but it is going to. It changes the velocity of business. Businesses are going to be organized around different structures. And for example, I can see businesses that have some sort of hybrid model, right, where they have an office that you can come into or not, and then some people work from home, and some people work from all over the globe. I just can. What I'm saying is, I can only see more people working from home or from a small satellite office than less, right? So I think that traditional businesses are going to increasingly get smaller and smaller, because office space is going to get less and less, because why would you pay for air conditioning, right? Why would you make people sit in traffic for an hour and a half a day, or some other practical social problems? So,
right, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think Decred has actually really put forth a process that can be copied by other organizations.
Yep. And I think this is like very relevant to like crypto projects, in which like most of the people are distributed, and it's sort of like a global community.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so like in Decred, we have folks on all continents, right? Folks that write code and are actively developing, and that's exactly what we want, right? We want to have a wide community of people with a lot of different cultural inputs. So, obviously we don't understand each other's cultures all the time, right? So if you're going to develop something that you want to use worldwide, it needs to have input from folks worldwide. So, and I think there's nothing but positive stuff there.
Yep. Vishal, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's in India, some of the bigger cities, they have such traffic congestion that like people spend 2 hours like one side just commuting to work, and like this is just like an added incentive for like people to work on open source projects and like earn money sitting at home.
Oh, absolutely. Why would you want to sit in traffic for 2 hours? I don't. I really super don't. So if I go look for a job elsewhere, I'm unsure I would ever be able to trade, sitting in traffic. So at the very least, I'd need something along the lines of, I'll show up at 11, right, when traffic is stopped. And then I'll leave at 3 before traffic starts again. It really is such an amount of wasted productivity, having folks sitting in traffic. So I don't know about you, but I'm pretty unhappy after sitting in a traffic jam for an hour. So if I get to work at that point, I'm not going to be very productive. I'm going to be complaining, right, for a while. So there's really nothing positive there. And it's also not very positive for the environment, right? Because you're just sitting there pumping out CO2 all day in your car while it's idling. It's a complete waste. So, and as maybe a bit hyperbole, but as the human race, we have to stop doing that, right? We need to be nicer to our planet. And, getting people off the road would be a pretty substantial contribution to that.
Right.
Yep. I think, it was great chatting with you. I just have just last final question. Can you walk us through the roadmap that you have planned for Decred? I was going to the website, you have a decentralized exchange, you have some things coming for privacy, DAE, decentralized autonomous entities, which is I think similar to the DAO of Ethereum and things like that.
Sure, let's start with the DAE. So Politeia is step 1 out of 3 steps to actually go full DAE or DAO. So we don't use the word DAO because that was a bit of a colossal failure, and we don't want to be associated with that word. So we came up with DAE instead. But there's 2 more steps. after Politeia. One of them is we need to basically ratify voting on the chain. So once a vote has been done on Politeia, the chain needs to confirm that the vote was valid and accurate. So that's going to require some consensus changes, because we're going to add some more primitives. We're going to add some additional crypto magic. We're probably going to start using some additional fields in the header. So that's going to be a big change. And basically what we're going to go do is probably something along the lines of having a sortition. So let's say 100 or 1,000 ticket holders needs to ratify the vote and basically say, yes, the outcome is what was expected. So, and obviously we don't have too much room in the blockchain, so we are going to have to do something clever like Schnorr signatures to kind of compress that data. So that is step 2. So, and then step 3 would be adding some additional things. Actually, no, sorry. I was thinking to step 4 actually. So step 3 is when we make the disbursement actually completely automatic. So once the vote has been ratified on the chain, now that action is actually also going to run a smart contract and then disburse funds to the proper keys that were provided, or proper addresses that were provided. And in other words, currently the way Politeia is working is once a vote is ratified by, humans look at the values, right? Okay, number is bigger, it's passed, and so somebody actually releases those funds. And that is going to be the end result of the DAE, is that it's fully automatic. Does that make sense? So, and at that point, between Politeia and on-chain voting, Decred is fully automatic on using the treasury funds. So, and then there's some steps on the DAE after that, and this is where a lot of folks ask questions like, so are you guys going to tokenize? Are you guys going to add tokens on top of Decred? And the answer to that is it's up to the voters, right? Up to the stakeholders to come up with some clever ideas there to see if that is something we want. And if the answer is yes, and if somebody is willing to build it, then I see no reason for that not to go forward. So let's see, what other items did you have on there? Privacy. So privacy is another one of those bears that we have been fighting for a while. We had some folks working on that, and we got really, really close. Then we lost some folks that were working on it for private reasons that we cannot mention. And it kind of stalled a little bit. I can tell you that right now, work has resumed on it. I don't have a date for you, but we are still hoping to be able to get it out there before the end of the year.
And like what specific, like what sort of architecture, and like what sort of privacy are you targeting? Like this is a very general thing.
Yeah, so
is this like layer?
So this is actually one of the things that as a very small development team that we have been hit with before, is that if we put our ideas out there, some other people may swoop them up. So once it's done enough, we are actually going to release all the code and everybody can look at it. But we need to have a couple of weeks, days of edge on what we're doing.
Yeah, head start.
Yeah, so Decred is literally the bleeding edge of cryptocurrency development. We have implemented quite a few firsts. So, but we also have been swooped in before where we had an idea, we made the idea public, and then some other project implemented it poorly, and now all of a sudden it's a bad idea. So that's why we are a little bit more close to the vest with big features like this.
Got it.
By the way, this is not going away over time with Politeia, right? Because with Politeia, you're going to be forced to put it out there. So you're going to be forced to publish it. So these are just side effects of us getting to done. And by the way, when I forgot to mention it in the prior answer, so the DAE, where everything is fully automatic, that is actually what Decred was supposed to be once we started thinking about it. That is the end goal. So once we get there, we have reached the final destination of our development. And I'm not saying that we're going to stop, but I'm just saying that was the original vision of Decred will happen that day. So that's, and the good news is we're actually starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train. So we're very excited about that portion. in seeing where, probably within months we'll be able to get there. So what else did you mention? You mentioned the DAX, right?
The DEX, yeah.
The DEX, yeah. So the DEX is an idea that we put forth to the community. There's a lot of detail involved, but the idea there is to basically create a exchange that fully and only works with atomic swaps. So so it's trustless, escrowless, and it's basically people on the internet doing their own price discovery, right? So I'm willing to buy this for that amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's then how it moves forward, right? So then somebody swoops in and buys that and moves the price. So it's a very basic system, but the idea is to basically have kind of a mempool of bids and asks, right? And do price discovery that way, and then once people sign up for it, then you execute the atomic swap. So it's not fast moving, and that's actually by design. I don't think that high frequency trading has done the financial world a big favor, minus making some people very wealthy. So so leveling the playing field, I think, is healthy as well here. So that's kind of the idea, is to basically build a distributed price discovery mechanism, basically. That's actually what it boils down to.
Okay. Okay.
So what else did we have on that list of yours?
I think you have covered it all. Yeah.
All right. Well, and we have quite a few ideas in addition to that are going to become.
You are free to share them. Yeah.
No, I'm not. Not yet, because they're going to be proposals, though. So what we're going to go do is we're going to actually start putting up proposals pretty soon here on things that we think are going to be interesting. And again, this is how Company Zero is expecting to remain in business, right? Is to put forth enough interesting proposals that people are willing to pay for our clever monkey tricks.
Yep, that makes sense.
And we definitely think that Decred is one of the best projects out there, and we wish you guys all the best, and we hope to see more new features coming out soon.
Well, thank you. Actually, I do want to close with that, is that Decred really has been engineered to be a project that's going to be around for a very long time. And if the cryptocurrency is easy to fork, it kind of makes it harder to predict where you're going to be in the future, right? Because you may end up with multiple projects or a single not fast enough moving project. So the Decred has been engineered to be around here for for decades to come. So I hope to be still hacking on it here in a while.
That is true. I personally as well, I'm super excited. I think Decred has one of the best communities, both the developer and the user friendly, the non-developer communities out there. Yep.
Right. And you guys have an awesome wallet as well.
We do have a really awesome wallet. And believe it or not, there's actually more things coming in that wallet that are going to make it increasingly easier to use. So, for example, the whole Politeia thing is going to get integrated within the wallet. So you're going to be able to vote on proposals inside the wallet. You can already vote on consensus changes and protocol changes, but the next version is going to start doing proposals as well. So, and we are going to continue to make it easier to use. Performance enhancements. I don't know if any of you guys actually tried the latest version of the Crediton. So now instead of going live in a couple of hours, it's like within 20 minutes or so. You can basically download the entire blockchain. Mm-hmm. So it has been made drastically better. Oh, actually, I need to say one more awesome thing that we're doing. So we are actually working on SPV, and it's kind of done. Most of it is in the Crediton already. It's just not been activated yet. So and that basically means that with that, you can actually launch a wallet within seconds from downloading. But it's all maintained by you. You have the same security profile. And we did some clever crypto tricks to actually prevent leaking of funds to the server that you're querying. So in other words, that was actually one of the issues within the Bitcoin version of SPV, where the node that you used could actually kind of figure out how many funds you had, where, and what. So we were able to obfuscate that. So in order to make SPV super duper awesome complete, is we're going to actually have to do a hard fork. So we're going to have to do a on-chain change. and that will actually make it even better. But that one is a little bit farther out in the future. But we will get to that as well. So, but that is a very exciting piece of technology, because what this also does is this buys you the ability to start doing a mobile app, because now you can basically not have any funds on your phone, right? But you can play with it. So there's some really cool things that are going to come out of the SPV work that has been done. So maybe you guys see a mobile wallet here pretty soon.
Right, that'll be awesome. Well, what do you expect the size of the wallet to be? Like the SPV wallet only downloads the headers, right? As far as I understand. So
it's going to be in the hundreds of Ks or megabytes. So something small enough that'll fit easily on any phone device without being a hog or a pig.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep. I think we have covered quite a lot, and thanks a lot, Marco, for taking the time out and speaking with us today. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome.